The Duras Ven fortress world of Quetzal hung in the void like a malignant jewel, its surface a lattice of interlocked defense platforms and planetary batteries. For 3 of their standard months, the combined fleets of the Galactic Confederation had been pulverizing themselves against this system. The Duras Ven, a species of crystalline, logic-driven beings, did not fight with passion or fury. They fought with the cold, brutal efficiency of a mathematical equation. Admiral Vrith of the Xylos Collective floated in his species' gelatinous nutrient tank on the bridge of the flagship Harmonious Thought. His sensory nodes analyzed the holographic tactical display with a deep, organic dread. The human fleet, a motley collection of ships that looked more like industrial accidents than instruments of war, had just translated into the system's edge. It was, by every tactical model, suicide. The Duras Ven had anticipated this relief force. They had laid a trap of breathtaking elegance. Their main fleet was positioned behind the system's 4th planet, hidden from initial scans. A smaller, seemingly vulnerable force was stationed at the main asteroid belt, Bait. The moment the humans committed to an attack on the Bait, the main Duras Ven fleet would execute a pincer movement, catching them in a crossfire between the hidden fleet and the planet's devastating defense grids. Vrith had shared his analysis with the human admiral, a man whose name was simply John Harper. Vrith had sent the tactical data, the probabilities, the near certainty of annihilation. The human's response had been a simple text message. "Thanks for the heads up. We got this." Now, Vrith watched in horrified fascination as the human fleet didn't proceed with cautious reconnaissance or attempt a clever flanking maneuver. They didn't even slow down. They accelerated directly toward the obvious trap, their formation as loose and chaotic as a flock of migrating birds. On the bridge of the UES Indomitable, Admiral John Harper sat in his chair, a cup of lukewarm coffee in his hand. He was a man in his 60s, with a face weathered by decades of space and stress, but his eyes held a calm, almost disarming twinkle. Around him, his crew moved with a practiced, almost lazy efficiency. There were no frantic shouts, no blaring alarms. A young helmsman was quietly humming a tune from the 22nd century. "Admiral, Duras Ven battle group has emerged from behind Quetzal's 4th planet. They're moving to intercept. Our tactical board is lighting up with targeting solutions," his first officer, Commander Eva Rostova, reported, her voice as steady as if she were discussing the weather. Harper took a sip of his coffee. "They spring in the trap, Eva?" "Looks like it, sir. Textbook pincer. We're the meat in the sandwich." A slow, almost innocent smile spread across Harper's face. It was a smile that, to the Xylos Collective watching from a safe distance, was utterly terrifying in its context. It was the smile of a man who had just been handed exactly what he wanted. "Perfect," Harper said softly. "All right, people, you heard the commander. The main course is here. Let's set the table. All ships, execute operation, kitchen sink." The human fleet, upon receiving the order, did something no logical military mind would ever predict. They didn't form a defensive sphere. They didn't try to break for the planet. Instead, the ships in the vanguard, the ones that looked like converted ore freighters, suddenly opened their massive bay doors. They didn't launch fighters. They launched asteroids, hundreds of them, thousands. They were not the sleek, guided missiles of the Confederation. They were chunks of rock and ice, some the size of a house, others as big as a small moon, each one fitted with a simple, brute-force gravity engine and a thick coating of ablative armor. They tumbled and spun in a chaotic, unpredictable cloud, a man-made asteroid field hurtling directly toward the oncoming Duras Ven fleet. The Duras Ven admiral, a being of pure crystal logic named KLX, processed this new data. His tactical matrix offered a solution. The asteroids were slow, unguided, and easy to destroy. He ordered a forward barrage. Lances of coherent energy lanced out from the Duras Ven warships, carving into the oncoming rocks. They vaporized hundreds, but the cloud was thick. And as each asteroid was destroyed, it didn't just vanish. It shattered into a million fragments, a scattershot of shrapnel that now filled the space between the two fleets. The Duras Ven shields, designed to deflect powerful concentrated energy beams and large, solid projectiles, were suddenly overwhelmed by a hailstorm of tiny, high-velocity pebbles. They flickered and strained, their resonance frequencies disrupted by the constant low-grade impacts. While the Duras Ven were busy swatting at rocks, the main human fleet, which had been hidden in the shadow of the asteroid cloud, made their move. They didn't charge. They just appeared. One moment, the space behind the debris field was empty. The next, it was filled with human warships that had used the asteroid's ionic trails and chaff to mask their approach. Now the humans were inside the Duras Ven's optimal weapons range. And the humans smiled. "Hit 'em with the mixtape," Harper ordered. The human ships opened fire. But it wasn't the coordinated, disciplined volleys of the Confederation. It was a sensory nightmare. Every ship seemed to be using a different weapon. Kinetic cannons that fired spinning, armor-piercing darts. Plasma lances that burned with an erratic, hungry fire. Mass drivers that flung hypervelocity slugs. And then there were the electronic warfare suites. And they didn't just try to jam the Duras Ven communications. They flooded their channels with a chaotic symphony of sound, fragments of 20th century rock music, reruns of ancient sitcoms, the screaming roar of Terran sports fans. The Duras Ven, beings of pure logic and order, were plunged into a sea of total, incomprehensible chaos. Their crystal minds, which relied on clean data streams and predictable patterns, began to fracture under the assault. KLX tried to re-establish control, his commands for a disciplined retreat and regroup being drowned out by a loop of an earth creature called a kitten, meowing set to a heavy bass beat. For the first time in his existence, he felt something his language had no word for: panic. One human ship, the Jolly Roger, a vessel that had been a deep space salvage tug in a previous life, did something so insane it defied belief. Instead of engaging the capital ships, it dove straight for the planet's surface, weaving through the defense grid's fire with an almost suicidal grace. It released its payload not on a military installation, but on a massive crystalline data processing nexus, a structure the size of a mountain that served as the Duras Ven's primary strategic hub. The payload wasn't a bomb. It was a viral agent. A self-replicating piece of code designed by a human programmer who had gotten bored during a long deployment. It didn't delete data or corrupt files. It simply refiled everything. The military secrets were filed under planetary cooking recipes. Fleet movements were cross-referenced with historical romance novels. The coordinates of their hidden shipyards were labeled pictures of cute alien animals. The Duras Ven's central nervous system, their perfect logical mind, was lobotomized by a bureaucratic nightmare. With their command structure in complete disarray and their ships blinded and confused, the Duras Ven were helpless. The human fleet didn't obliterate them. They simply moved in and with pinpoint shots disabled their engines and weapons. One by one, the magnificent crystalline warships went dark, their crews trapped inside their own minds. From a safe distance, Admiral Vrith watched the battle's conclusion. It had lasted less than an hour. The flawless, a mathematically perfect Duras Ven ambush had been turned into a chaotic, humiliating rout. The human fleet hadn't won through superior strategy or firepower. They had won by being utterly, incomprehensibly illogical. They had treated a war like a playground, a battlefield like a joke. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Commander Rostova looked at the tactical display. The system was secure. The trap was broken. She turned to Admiral Harper, who was pouring himself a fresh cup of coffee. "Sir?" she asked, a genuine curiosity in her voice. "How did you know that would work?" Harper looked at her, and that calm, innocent smile returned. "No? I didn't know, Eva. I just figured If they've spent 1,000 years building a perfect, logical way to fight wars, now they've probably never had to deal with anyone who wasn't playing by the same rules. We didn't beat their plan. We just refused to acknowledge it existed. He gestured toward the view screen, where the captured Duras Ven ships hung in the void. They built a beautiful, intricate game of chess. We just showed up and started playing Calvin ball. They never stood a chance. He took a sip of his coffee, the warm, bitter liquid a small comfort in the cold vastness of space. The battle was over, and humanity, with their calm smiles and their chaotic hearts, had once again proven that in a universe of rules, the only real wild card was them.